The message that shattered the peace of 600 star systems wasn't a declaration of war, or a diplomatic demand, or even a cry for help. It was a warning. And humanity delivered it the only way humanity ever did anything: too loud, too bold, and far too late for anyone to stop. The Galactic Concord had been expecting a humble plea. Humans were new to the stars, barely a century out of the gravity well. Their borders were small, their fleets supposedly primitive, their diplomats way too fond of sarcasm to be taken seriously. Most species saw humanity as a curiosity, dangerous in the way a cornered animal is dangerous, but nothing more. Then the Concord's patrol fleet obliterated Outpost Kestrel. 2,000 civilians. Gone. A navigational error, they said. A tragic misunderstanding, they insisted. But on that quiet night, hovering above the ruins of Earth's first deep space colony, Admiral Juno Rourke activated the Bra wave. Her voice carried across half the galaxy. "This is humanity's final warning to the Concorde. You've made a grave mistake. You killed our people. You touched our home. You will regret the day you thought we were weak." Nothing else. Just that. Every listening species laughed, or trembled, or wrote it down in their archives under primitive rhetoric human. But for the Concorde, that short broadcast was a ghost breathing on their neck. Before the smoke even settled, a scavenger vessel drifted into the destruction zone, an old rust bucket from the fringe, crewed by outsiders who didn't care for galactic politics. They were there for scrap, tech, maybe a few corpses to sell to the Black Labs. What they found instead made even their hardened blood run cold. A recording. A black box. Humans didn't usually encrypt their last messages. They wore their tragedies like flags. But this one had a lock, a seal, and a warning emblem the scavengers had never seen before: a red sigil of an eagle, wings spread wide over a burning star. They cracked it anyway. Of course they did. The console flickered, and the recording began. A man appeared, mid-50s, grizzled beard, eyes like steel under pressure. He spoke calmly, too calmly for someone about to die. "My name is Commander Elias Brandt of Outpost Kestrel. If you're watching this, then the Concorde fired first." He leaned in. "And I want whoever finds this to understand something. Humans don't do proportional response. We don't escalate. We end things." The scavenger captain swallowed hard. Brandt continued, voice steady as a noose. "Earth will give the Concorde one chance to apologize. One chance to make it right." A faint rumble echoed behind him, explosions. "And if they don't? If they pretend this was a miscalculation? Then you'll see something they bury deep even from themselves." Brandt smiled without warmth. "You'll see what humans become when someone takes everything from us." The video glitched as the outpost blew apart. The scavengers didn't keep the recording. They ran it straight to the black market datanet, where it spread through the underworld like wildfire, until even the Concorde counselors themselves saw it. And by the time they tried to bury it, every major species already knew. Humans were preparing for war. Most in the Concorde laughed it off. Humans simply didn't have the numbers. Their fleet logs were public: a few dozen cruisers, some carriers, nothing that matched even a single Concorde battlegroup. But then the scouts reported strange activity at the Sol border. Not weapon buildups, not exactly. Shipyards running non-stop. Civilian vessels gutted and repurposed. Industrial output rising at a speed no species could match. And something worse. Every ambassador had been recalled. Human space went dark. The Concorde sent diplomats to smooth things over. Humans rejected them. The Concorde sent a formal apology. Humans refused it. The Concorde sent threats. Humans ignored them. For older species, patient, methodical, bureaucratic, this wasn't how conflict unfolded. War required steps. Rights. Legal frameworks. Sanctions. Humans just disappeared. Like wolves sinking into the tall grass. 3 weeks after the apology was rejected, the Concorde's 7th Fleet, 15 capital ships, jumped into the Sol frontier to stabilize the region. Admiral Tlevek, a six-eyed Jelthuri, ordered an immediate combat probe. She expected minor resistance. Maybe a handful of defenders. She didn't expect the message that pinged her flagship. A direct transmission. A single line of text. "We told you. This is our final warning." Tlevek hissed and ordered the probe to advance. But the probe didn't advance. Because there was nothing to advance toward. A wall of metal filled the void. Hundreds of vessels. Thousands. Some large, some small, some so crude they looked welded in a garage, but all armed. All modified. All bristling with the unmistakable silhouette of rail cannons, missile pods, kinetic arrays, and weapons no Concorde engineer had ever seen. Humanity hadn't built a fleet. Humanity had emptied its entire civilization. Cargo ships converted into gun platforms. Mining rigs turned into armored rams. Passenger liners with armor plates bolted onto their hulls like medieval shields. Every human who could hold a wrench had turned their home into a weapon. The Seventh Fleet froze. And then a new figure appeared on their screens. Admiral Juno Rourke. Center of command. Eyes red with grief and fury. She spoke softly. "You killed 2,000 of our people." She gestured behind her at the armada, ugly, improvised, massive. "So we built something else. Something you didn't account for." Her voice hardened. "A civilization that refuses to die." Tlevek, panicked, ordered weapons to charge. Rourke nodded almost sadly. "You had your chance." And then the humans fired. The first volley wasn't elegant. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't even consistent or well-timed. But it was devastating. Civilian-grade ships shouldn't have been able to generate that much kinetic force. Yet the humans had found a trick: magnetized rail clusters feeding hundreds of slugs simultaneously, accelerating them to fractions of light speed. The Seventh Fleet's shields failed in seconds. The humans didn't stop. They rammed. They boarded. They tore through Concorde vessels with improvised cutting torches and brute strength. Human Marines in repurposed construction armor fought like demons, each one burning with the need to avenge Kestrel. Admiral Tlevek realized the truth too late. This wasn't a military assault. This was a species in mourning, wielding grief like a hammer. One by one, the Seventh Fleet fell silent. And when the last Concorde dreadnought detonated, Admiral Rourke transmitted a final message to the Concorde capital. "Your move." The Concorde didn't move. Not immediately. The council chambers were a cathedral of indecision, holograms of war maps flickering as each species debated. Some were horrified. Some were furious. Most were terrified, but none admitted it aloud. It was human efficiency, not their numbers, that terrified them. Every strike the humans had launched had been brutal, precise, and merciless, but also utterly improvised. Every attack looked accidental, chaotic, yet somehow left the Concorde fleets shattered. "You're telling me the humans just converted entire civilian industries into a war machine overnight?" hissed Councillor Vrek, one of the council's oldest minds. Six limbs drummed nervously against the armrest. "Their output should be a fraction of what we see. Logistically, it's impossible." Impossible, yes. Unless you underestimated them. Because humans didn't play by your rules. They didn't think in supply chains or resource quotas or predictable military doctrine. They thought in survival and revenge. They thought in solutions that bent physics, engineering, and common sense into something horrifyingly effective. Across human space, the engineers were laughing. Or maybe cursing. Or maybe both. In the orbital shipyards of Mars, molten metal sprayed across skeletal frames as crews welded industrial transports into hybrid dreadnoughts. Soldiers tested improvised weapon arrays, firing through simulations that would have melted conventional targeting systems. Civilians in exosuits drove massive rigs into orbit, each one a cannon, a battering ram, or a missile platform. Lieutenant Caravas wiped sweat from her brow and muttered, "You think the Concorde even has a clue what hit them?" Her friend, Sergeant Micah Dre, grinned behind the mask of his helmet. "They'll know soon enough. Hopefully before they send reinforcements. Or after." Kara said, tightening the bolts on a makeshift railgun. Because humans, well, we don't wait for permission. And they didn't. While the Concorde scrambled to rebuild what was lost, humanity was already on the move. Small squads of Marines boarded crippled Concorde vessels, hijacking them in minutes, stripping weaponry, and detonating reactor cores remotely to leave behind only husks. In spaceports across human-controlled systems, citizens converted civilian freighters into rammed ships, stockpiling them like traps and choke points no enemy would expect. By the time the Concorde realized humanity wasn't bluffing, it was too late. Humanity had already reached the fringe systems, where some species had begun whispering warnings among themselves. The humans weren't just fighting, they were rewriting what war meant. They struck with calculated terror, crushing fleets and colonies in ways that shocked even the most battle-hardened alien admirals. In the Galactic Senate, a young Trelliker delegate screamed across the chamber, claws snapping in frustration. They can't be allowed to continue. They are animals. A seasoned human diplomat, older than any in the room, smiled thinly. Animals? We're humans. And don't forget, we've only just started. Meanwhile, Admiral Rourke's personal flagship, a monstrous patchwork of salvage technology, drifted into orbit above one of the Concorde's outer colonies. The humans on board had suffered losses. Too many. They'd watched their friends, engineers, medics, civilians alike, die for every gain, but each death only sharpened their resolve. Rourke stood on the bridge, staring at the planet below. Civilian Concorders fled in panic, and orbital defense arrays barely registered the human fleet's presence before being shredded by improvised kinetic barrages. Her second-in-command, Commander Elric Hahn, approached cautiously. Admiral, we have civilians trapped on the planet. They're reaching out for evacuation. Rourke didn't flinch. We're not here to save them. We're here to teach a lesson. Hahn hesitated. A lesson, yes, but they're already cowering. Rourke cut him off, voice quiet but lethal. They don't understand yet. Fear isn't enough. Respect is earned in blood, not apologies. She turned, eyes scanning the bridge full of engineers, soldiers, and civilians, all of whom had become soldiers by necessity. Load everything. Every railgun. Every missile. Every scrap of metal we can hurl at them. Let them see what happens when you push humans too far. At that moment, a massive Concorde fleet emerged from hyperspace above the colony, reinforcements that the Council had finally assembled. Thousands of ships, sleek and deadly, bristling with weapons that dwarfed anything humanity had originally deployed. The bridge went silent. Then Rourke smiled. Perfect, she said. Let's make history. The ensuing battle was a symphony of chaos. Concorde dreadnoughts fired with cold precision. Human ships dodged, rammed, and retaliated with jury-rigged but devastating weaponry. In the vacuum of space, it wasn't only technology that mattered, it was human ingenuity, desperation, and ferocity. One Concorde ship attempted to retreat. It didn't. A converted transport rammed it from the side, tearing through its armor. Explosions lit the void like a fireworks display in hell. Boarding parties of human Marines swarmed the crippled vessels, cutting, shooting, and taking control within minutes. And all the while, Rourke's message repeated across every channel the Concorde monitored. We told you! This is our final warning. By the end of the day, entire sectors that had once felt invulnerable were reduced to debris fields. Ships that had cost trillions to construct lay twisted, hollow, and burning. Civilian populations that had once considered humanity quaint or laughable now hid in fear on remote moons, whispering of humans who didn't just fight, they unmade empires. Yet even in victory, humanity paid the price. Every loss weighed heavily. Families lost. Friends gone. Entire communities sacrificed to send a single, undeniable message to the galaxy: do not underestimate us. And while the Concorde reeled, trying to comprehend what had just happened, Admiral Rourke received an encrypted signal from an unexpected source. A faction of the Council herself had trusted. The message was simple, almost polite. Admiral Rourke, we underestimated you. Humanity must be reckoned with. But there are others watching. Be careful. Rourke leaned back in her chair, weary but unbroken. Her jaw tightened, her eyes cold with the weight of what she had done, and what she had yet to do. Somewhere in the shadows of the galaxy, powers far older and far more patient than the Concord were watching. Humanity had announced its arrival with unparalleled force. They had warmed the galaxy with blood, fire, and ingenuity. But the game was only beginning. And the humans? They were just warming up. The galaxy had never truly understood humans. It thought it had, once, in the early days of first contact. Naive, chaotic, amusing. Laughable. And now, the Concord was learning the cost of that mistake. But humans weren't done. Not even close. Admiral Rourke's fleet had become more than a force of vengeance. It had become a moving testament to human ingenuity, brutality, and unflinching audacity. Every ship carried a story of improvisation. Every weapon told a tale of necessity turned genius. Humans didn't just fight, they invented victory on the fly. They descended on another Concorde-held system, a cluster of starports once considered untouchable. Defenses were strong, orbital turrets, kinetic barriers, automated drones, Concorde battle squads trained for centuries in interstellar combat. But the humans had a different approach. Captain Mara Sloan, leading a boarding contingent, muttered to her second-in-command. "Remember the plan: chaos, confusion, and carnage. Keep it messy. Keep it loud. Make them panic before they can think." Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Corvin Drake, grinned behind his visor. "Messy, loud carnage sounds like Tuesday on Earth." Exactly. That was humanity's edge. The galaxy expected neat, regulated combat. Humanity delivered unpredictability, war as improvisation, as performance, as machine intelligence married to sheer, unrestrained instinct. The Concorde's orbital turrets activated, lances of searing plasma piercing the void. Human ships weaved and rammed, each strike improvised. Explosions erupted in bursts as boarding craft launched from converted freighters, cutting through automated defenses. Sloan's team breached the primary control hub. Concorde officers scrambled, weapons drawn. They expected soldiers in standard armor. Instead, humans in repurposed exosuits charged like wolves, half engineer, half man, all fury. "Drop your weapons!" Sloan shouted. Her voice carried over the comms, calm and icy, even as sparks rained from damaged conduits. "We're not here to negotiate. We're here to remind you of a simple truth: you underestimated us. You killed our people. You touched our home. You'll regret it." Shots rang out. Sparks flew. Concorde officers fell, confused by the ferocity and precision of a force they had considered primitive. Back in orbit, the human fleet unleashed improvised orbital bombardments. Converted cargo ships fired makeshift rail guns that ripped through Concorde cruisers like paper. Mining rigs, stripped of cargo and filled with high-yield explosives, plowed into capital ships at terrifying speed. The Concorde's superior shields barely held, and when they failed, the humans struck with relentless, improvisational brutality. Above the carnage, Rourke watched from her flagship's bridge. She didn't gloat. That wasn't human style. But her jaw was set, her eyes burning with the memory of Kestrel. Every kill was calculated, every strike meaningful. Yet even amidst the chaos, a small, twisted sort of humor lingered. Humanity had weaponized irony. Ships marked for scrapping now rained death on vessels that had once looked down on them. Cargo drones carrying agricultural products were converted into torpedoes that blew apart Concorde supply lines. Mining lasers, once intended to slice rock, shredded battlecruisers. Somewhere deep in the enemy fleet, Admiral Tlevek's flagship attempted a counterstrike. Concorde fighters swarmed the human fleet. But the humans anticipated it. Drones were released, decoys, magnetic disruptors, kinetic nets, and the fighters were caught like insects in a storm. Tlevek realized the nightmare had only just begun. Her comms were flooded with intercepted transmissions, human ships coordinating via informal signals, codes only humans could understand, patterns that no alien mind could decipher. Every attack was a trap, every defense a death sentence. And then the humans did something the Concorde had not anticipated. They set a planet ablaze. Not by nuclear weapons or planet-busting beams. Humans used the very infrastructure the Concorde had left behind against them. Terraforming stations, energy grids, civilian factories, all rigged to detonate in sequence. Cities of Concorde colonists burned while human ships wove between orbital debris, launching strikes with surgical precision. The Concorde's communications officer stammered. "They are using our technology against us." "Yes," hissed Rourke in a rare moment of personal reflection. "And they'll remember this lesson for the next 1,000 years. Yet for all the carnage, humans took prisoners. Not because they needed mercy. But because they needed leverage. Because they remembered Kestrel. Because every action carried meaning, even amid the chaos. In the aftermath, as Concorde fleets limped away, their remaining officers shook and whispered among themselves. They had underestimated humanity. Not just the humans' firepower, not just their fleet. No, that was irrelevant. They had underestimated the human mind, its capacity to turn tragedy into strategy, grief into weapon, sorrow into fury. And somewhere, buried under the carnage, a small child watched. Survivors from captured Concorde colonies told stories later of her. She was barely 10, yet she wandered among the human crews without fear. One pilot, laughing at her tiny stature, offered her a snack. She accepted, but only after examining the weaponry nearby, asking questions about trajectory and yield. Humans were teaching the galaxy a lesson on more than violence. They were teaching it on ingenuity, ruthlessness, and unshakable will. Rourke received a transmission from the Concorde Council, not a threat, not an apology. Just a single phrase, trembling in their ancient, bureaucratic syntax. "We did not see this coming." Rourke allowed herself a faint smile. She knew they still hadn't seen everything. Because humans didn't just fight with weapons. Humans fought with imagination, with chaos, with courage. Humans fought with history behind them, with grief in their veins, and with the unwillingness to be broken. And as her fleet jumped to the next sector, leaving smoldering ruins in their wake, she thought only one thing. They'll never forget us. Somewhere, deep in the shadows of galactic politics, older and wiser species began to whisper. The Concorde was lucky humans were small. They were lucky humanity had only just emerged into the stars. Because if Earth had been more than a backwater for millennia, no one wanted to imagine it. And yet, the humans had already begun to show them. By the time the Concorde realized the true scale of the threat, it was already too late. Entire sectors lay in ruin, fleets vaporized or captured, colonies abandoned or scorched. And still, the humans advanced, not recklessly, but with a terrifying, surgical precision that no one could anticipate. Admiral Rourke stood on the bridge of her flagship, staring at the galactic map. Red markers flickered where human ships had struck, smoke and fire tracing the path of vengeance. Her face was stoic, but beneath the surface, a storm of grief and fury churned. Every destroyed Concorde vessel represented someone lost. Every colonist saved, or captured, was a testament to her people's resolve. Behind her, Commander Elric Hahn approached cautiously. "Admiral, we've done all we can here. The Concorde fleets are retreating. Their council is paralyzed. What next?" Rourke didn't answer immediately. Her gaze swept across the stars, each point of light a potential enemy, a potential threat, a potential target. Then she spoke, low and deliberate. "Next, we ensure they never forget this. Humanity doesn't just fight to survive. Humanity fights to be remembered." Her words weren't empty bravado. They were strategy. Humans had learned centuries ago that survival alone wasn't enough. Respect, fear, and reputation were weapons just as potent as railguns or missiles. A Concorde ambassador, trembling in a makeshift communication channel, tried to interject. "Admiral Rourke, please, we can negotiate." Rourke cut him off, her voice calm but lethal. "You killed Kestrel. You thought we were weak. You thought a small, fledgling species would quietly accept your mistake. You were wrong. Dead wrong. She gestured to the fleet behind her. We gave you a warning. You ignored it. Now, you face humanity. The transmission ended abruptly as the ambassador's station erupted into sparks. Another human improvisation, another lesson. And then the final phase began. It wasn't enough to repel the Concorde. Humanity didn't just want survival. They wanted a galaxy that remembered what it meant to push humans too far. Entire planetary systems were carefully targeted. Critical Concorde infrastructure, weapon depots, and industrial centers were left intact only when useful for propaganda. Images of human ingenuity and ferocity, captured by unarmed drones and broadcast across the galaxy, spread like wildfire. Every species that had once laughed at humanity now witnessed it as a storm, uncontainable and merciless. Meanwhile, aboard one of the larger human carriers, Lieutenant Caravas surveyed the aftermath of the latest strike. She turned to Sergeant Micah Dre, who was quietly repairing a makeshift rail gun. You ever think about what we're doing? She asked. Dre smirked, wiping grime from his brow. Every day. But you know what? It's beautiful in a terrifying way. Humans always find a way. We always do. Kara nodded. She couldn't deny it. There was a strange, dark poetry to it, the chaos, the improvisation, the sheer audacity. Humans had turned grief into steel, vengeance into innovation, tragedy into fire. And yet, victory didn't taste sweet. It was heavy, soaked with loss. For every Concorde ship that fell, for every colony destroyed, humans mourned. Every strike carried a memory, a reminder of Kestrel, of families lost, of friends who would never return. Admiral Rourke watched silently as the last Concorde fleets retreated, crippled and humiliated. Her voice broke the quiet, low and grim. This is just the beginning. Humanity isn't cruel. We're not monsters. But we're not weak either. Never weak. Somewhere in the distant galaxy, older species, ancient and wise beyond imagination, began to reconsider their assumptions. A single thought echoed through their ranks. If humans could do this after barely a century in space, what might they accomplish in 1,000 years? Rourke's fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving a trail of scorched systems and shattered fleets. Each jump was a reminder: humanity would not be ignored. Humanity would not be underestimated. Humanity would endure. And then, just as the Concorde thought it had survived, the humans delivered their final twist. Every captured Concorde ship was returned, crewed by human engineers who left every weapon upgraded, every shield reinforced, and a single human message engraved on the hulls for all to see. This is your final warning. Humanity remembers. Humanity learns. Humanity wins. It was more than a message. It was a declaration, a symbol, a mark burned into the memory of every species. The humans of Earth did not fight like other civilizations. They fought smarter, faster, harder, and when pushed too far, they became a force beyond imagination. For the Concorde, it was a humiliation unparalleled in galactic history. For humanity, it was justice. And for the galaxy, it was a revelation. Humans were no longer a fledgling species to be patronized or ignored. They were a storm. A reckoning. A warning that echoed through space and time. Admiral Rourke stared at the stars, feeling the weight of all they had done, and the price they had paid. Somewhere in the vastness of the galaxy, someone would remember this day forever. She allowed herself the faintest smile, bitter, victorious, and unwavering. Let them remember, she whispered. And somewhere, in the silence between stars, humanity roared. The final warning had been delivered. And the galaxy would never be the same again.